Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concept series. And in this video we're going to be looking at advanced use of significance testing in MRDCL. Now first of all, a few things about this video before we start. It's very much going to focus on how you do things and the syntax involved, and it might be worth being clear about what it's not going to cover. It's not going to cover understanding what some of the terms that will be used in this video actually mean. It does assume that you understand significance testing and the terms that go with it. And it doesn't explain what the data means in any great detail when you see some results that we're going to present. And finally, if you're new to significance testing, you should really have watched the video on significance testing in the fundamentals series of videos before watching this, because that describes the use of significance testing in a little bit more detail, whereas this is starting at a level already. So we're going to start by looking at two banners that have been set up here in this particular for use in this particular video. You'll see that first of all we've got banner 1, which has got a false total column in it with a T, gender, region, and some breaks here from a rating scale, putting together first of all people who say 1 to 2, code 3, code 4 to 5. So quite a sort of standard banner, and you can see the text down here. Now you'll see some options in this particular set of labels here, and it's important they're input in exactly as they are here, otherwise they won't do quite what you want. And these, by the way, are new features in the 2021 version of MRDCL. And the first bit of syntax that's new in there is this syntax that plus question mark plus, and that what that tells MRDCL to do when you're carrying out significance testing is to compare that column against all the ones that follow until you find another plus question mark plus. And in the case of having no other plus question mark plus, it's going to compare it against all the columns that follow here. And then you can also have this syntax which allows you to have selected columns that you're going to compare against. So we've got male here, which has got plus DE plus, which means that the males will be compared against North and Central, regardless of what level you're doing your significance testing, whether that's at level 0, level 1, or level 2. It will always compare this column against D and E. And similarly, you can see that female with B has been compared against G and H. So you can, if you like, make comparisons between columns that are not within the same header group. And as you are probably aware, that much of significance testing that takes place happens within SHG1, which means compare it at the banner level, which would be, in this case, gender, region, and Q12C. So that's the first thing we're going to look at. And then we've got another banner down here, which is fairly similar. And this has got question 9 on the end of it. And question 9 is a multi-response response question. You can see its main factors. So for this particular banner, you'll see that people could obviously answer any number of these 5 answers here. 1 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them, or indeed all 5 of them, or none of them, of course. So they're the two banners that we're working with. And if I scroll down to the tables, you can see we've got 2 tables here which are using SHG11 and SIG5. So we're going to look at, for now, the different types of settings and new settings that you can have for SIG and for SHG. So let's start with SIG. And previously you were allowed to have just 0 meaning nothing and 1 and 2. 1 was using a Z-test formula. 2 was using a non-standard Z-test formula, which I think fairly few people use, but it is in the manual, the actual specification of that. But there's some new ones now that run for 3, 4, 5, and 6. So SIG3 means that rather than using a Z-test, it's using a T-test. 4 means it's using a T-test with continuity correction. 5 means it's using a T-test, but it should be used when you want to use the overlap formula. So what does that mean, the overlap formula? Well, where you have single response questions, it will make no difference between a SIG3 and a SIG5. They will just both work on the t-test. But where you've got a multiple response question, such as main factors as we have here, where there's some overlap between respondents. So as I said before, a respondent might appear in cheap price and punctuality, for example, or maybe in all 5 of those categories. The overlap formula will be applied, which takes account of the fact that respondents are in multiple columns within that banner header. And finally, there's SIG6, which uses both the t-test, the overlap formula, and the continuity correction, which is an option that we've now put into MRDCL. Now, you also see here that SHG has some new headings, and previously you had 0, 1, 0, 2, and 3. 0 meant compare against all columns in the table. 1 meant compare within the banner point. So that would, for example, within gender would have compared males against females. SH2 would have gone to the next level of header. So if you had half of your banner split between males with underneath it age and region, for example, and the other half females with age and region, it would have compared at the second header level, and 3 worked at a level above that, which I think again is fairly rarely used. So now you have SHG 11, 12 and 13, and they have the same effect as SHG 1, 2 and 3, except they also do what SHG 0 does and compares against the total less the people in that particular column. So when we apply SHG 0, that would compare, for example, by default in here, it would compare central against all respondents who are not in central, in other words, all the other regions. With SHG 11, it would apply at the region level and compare all these columns, but also it would compare it against the total less that particular column. So it's actually sort of combining SHG 0 and 1 together. So 11 is like 0 and 1 together, SHG 12 is like 0 and 2 together, and SHG 13 is 0 and 3 together. So let's run these tables now and just look at the output that we're getting. And you can see now, because I've got question mark plus question mark, T is compared, or the total column has been labelled T, is compared against every column. A is compared against DE, so you can see D appearing here, and I can see E appearing here, and likewise in the E column I can see A appearing here, and B is compared against G and H, and in the table you can see the same thing applying there. Now when we come to these columns here for the main factors, they're using the overlap formula now, because that's a multi-response question and people could appear in more than one of those columns. So the overlap formula is also being applied there. Now there's a few things to say that where some caution is needed with the overlap formula. First of all, you can manipulate rows in tables when you use SIG 5 and 6, but you cannot manipulate the columns, because 5 and 6 will not work, because effectively you're doing arithmetic that doesn't know what sample's going into those columns. So do not use manip with columns 5 and 6, with SIG 5 and 6. And also, if you overlay tables, SIG 5 and 6 will not work correctly, so you should use one of the other SIG options. That would also apply, for example, to a summary table where you're putting, if you like, total columns of rating scales side by side. SIG 5 and 6 would not apply there. So there are some restrictions. There is one final restriction. When you use the overlap formula in SIG 5 and 6, you are limited to 90 columns on your table, and that might seem restrictive, but the reason for that is what is actually going on behind the scenes in MRDCL is actually comparing every column with all of the other columns. So you actually behind the scenes is analysing hundreds and hundreds of columns of data to produce those tables. And indeed, in a large set of tables, if you actually have 90 columns, you'll find that runs are substantially slower because it's actually producing thousands of columns to apply the overlap formula correctly. So this video has been useful to you. If you want to go back to look at some of the basic things about applying significance testing, there is a video on significance testing in the fundamental series of videos. Thank you.